Time now for Fantasy on Ice. Pete Jensen, Nick Alberta, you can see it right there. They have got the Fantasy on Ice podcast, and they will give you every little detail you need to know about taking care of your fantasy team. The guys are ready to chat a little fantasy right now, so let's get to them. Pete and Nick, take it away.
What's up, EJ? We're here to break down a lot of fantasy implications of things going on around the league, but let's start off, Nick, with the impact of the Evander Kane signing with the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, this is a pretty big mid-season move to be happening with a guy that became a free agent, and he's one of the best category coverage assets in the entire league, fantasy-wise.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So far, so good. 1 goal, 3 shots on goal, 4 hits in his debut on Saturday night against Montreal. But Pete, with all due respect to the Habs, I want to see Edmonton play a real NHL team. I think that starts tonight with the Ottawa Senators, starts as well with the Washington Capitals this week. Before making an accurate depiction or judgment on this Kane scenario, but I think across the board, there's value to be found in Edmonton right now.
Right, and Kane is starting off on the top line with elite center Connor McDavid, and also on the other side, opposite wing, is Kyler Yamamoto, who quietly has scored 9 points in his past 12 games, including an assist in Kane's debut against the Habs. So maybe even Yamamoto, who has better than a hit per game this year, has a little appeal and rising above some of the other names that we've seen have fantasy relevance at different points this season, whether it's Zach Hyman, Jesse Puljujarvi, Zach Kassian for a hit or miss stream, but it seems like Yamamoto maybe could stick in that spot for the rest of the season. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that front, and that's the thing too with Edmonton. I think just the added wrinkle, the fact you add Evander Kane now, I just think it adds so much more depth up and down that lineup. And we talk about maybe some of the best third lines in hockey. You look at the third line right now with Nugent Hopkins, Kassian, and Zach Hyman, who were really, really good. Again, you got to preface by saying it was against Montreal on Saturday, and I'm very intrigued, Pete, to see what happens going forward here in Edmonton. Yes, we really like Kyler Yamamoto. From there, Pete, let's go to some waiver wire pickups, and we'll start in Minnesota. Unfortunately, all Minnesota needed to do to find a way to get Kevin Fiala was call it Matt Boldy, wasn't it?
Boldy's been awesome. 9 points in 9 games for the rookie with a +8 and 23 shots on goal. Playing on whatever you want to call it, second line, third line, because I know they got the other depth line with Eriksson Ek that's been performing really well since he returned from injury and COVID. But I picked him up before he was recalled. Now he's up to 12%, so you could still get this guy in many of your formats out there. Certainly a guy that you want to prioritize in keeper or dynasty leagues almost across the board. A sneaky name, speaking of third liners, Mason Marchman for the Florida Panthers is even lower roster percentage at 6% last I checked. And he's playing with Anton Lundell, the productive rookie, and Sammy Reinhart. So nice lineup placement there for Marchman. Diamond in the rough, right, Nick?
Yeah, certainly. And I think the way the Florida Panthers score goals these days, and I think anytime the Cats play, take the over, but they're averaging around 4 goals per game. So I think any piece to that pie, you want it. And I just think you look at the body of work of Marchman. He's been a crown jewel so far in terms of DFS pickups in fantasy hockey. From there, we roll to Dylan Strome, Pete. He's been on fire as of late, playing with Patrick Kane and Brandon Hagel on that top line for the Hawks.
I will say that I have a lot less confidence in the Chicago Blackhawks than I do the other two teams we just mentioned, the Minnesota Wild and the Florida Panthers. That said, for the rest of this season, Dylan Strome's playing for a new contract, right, Nick? So He's got back-to-back multi-point games totaling 6 points. The good thing for staying power here for Strome, top line and first power play with Patrick Kane, and also DeBrincat on the first power play unit. So you got to love that exposure for sure.
I will say I'm cautiously optimistic on the Dylan Strome front because it seems like we've had like 3 billion stops and starts. And I think everything you just mentioned, I just think the attachment of Patrick Kane, you have to go after Dylan Strome when it comes to fantasy hockey right now, at least a short-term waiver claim. With that in mind, Pete, a busy February ahead for the Ottawa Senators, a busy 2-week slate as well. And there's a couple guys certainly we're looking at this week.
Definitely. And they play 6 games in the next 2 weeks. So in your Yahoo Fantasy League, you'll see that because of the All-Star game, because of some of the postponements and rescheduled games, this is a 2-week scoring period. So Ottawa plays some of the most games. They do have 2 key injuries to Drake Batherson and Josh Norris. But as much as you miss out on having those guys, maybe even if you didn't have them, you could go out to the waiver wire and try to pick up some of these guys, whether it's Tim Stützle, Tyler Ennis, Alex Formenton, who has 16 points in his past 18 games. That's another sleeper rookie that's been coming on strong here over the past month or so, Nick.
Yeah, that's the prevailing story as well. As Brady Tkachuk has been ice cold, even with Batherson and Norris in the lineup. He's scoreless in 12 games, although he's still put on 50 shots on goal. That's what he loves to do. And I think eventually that streak will be snapped. But certainly you look at Tim Stützle, that's probably the one guy I'm looking at, the fact that maybe it's time to break out for Stützle. He's got his feet wet here in the NHL, and now the prime opportunity to play with Brady Tkachuk. And then you have the veteran in Tyler Ennis, who's been hot as of late. But I do think, and I do feel it'll be a revolving door on that wing. I think Stützle will stay in that position, but I still wonder about Tyler Ennis. But I think in general, the Sens should score some goals over the next little while, Pete.
I agree. I think it's a good buy low window for a fantasy trade for Brady Tkachuk, even without his trusted line mates. And also don't sleep on Matt Murray, 3-0-2, 937 save percentage and 1 shutout in his past 5 games for the former 2-time Stanley Cup champ with the Pittsburgh Penguins. So don't forget about that name. Back to you, EJ.